Krishnamurti, in dialogue with Dr. Alan W. Anderson. J. Krishnamurti was born in South India and educated in England. For the past 40 years, he has been speaking in the United States, Europe, India, Australia, and other parts of the world. From the outset of his life's work, he repudiated all connections with organized religions and ideologies and said that his only concern was to set men absolutely, unconditionally free. He is the author of many books, among them The Awakening of Intelligence, The Urgency of Change, Freedom from the Known, and The Flight of the Eagle. This is one of a series of dialogues between Krishnamurti and Dr. Alan W. Anderson, who is professor of religious studies at San Diego State University, where he teaches Indian and Chinese scriptures and the oracular tradition. Dr. Anderson, a published poet, received his degree from Columbia University and the Union Theological Seminary. He has been honored with a Distinguished Teaching Award from the California State Universities.
Mr. Krishnamurti, I was wonderfully overjoyed in our last conversation. For myself, just as one who was trying in listening to you to learn something of his inwardness, to follow along the passage that we had made from fear through the points as we moved until we came to pleasure. And as we left off, we were still talking of pleasure. And I hope we can begin now to move along.
Yes. We were saying, sir, weren't we? Pleasure, enjoyment, delight, and joy and happiness.
Mm-hmm.
And what relationship has pleasure with enjoyment and with joy and with happiness? Is pleasure happiness? Is pleasure joy? Is pleasure enjoyment? Or is pleasure something entirely different from those two?
In English, we think we make a distinction between pleasure and joy without necessarily knowing what we mean. In our use, in our employment of the words, we will discriminate sometimes. We think it odd to use the word pleasure rather than joy when we think that joy is appropriate.
Yes.
The relation between the word please and pleasure interests me very much. We'll say to a person, please sit down, and usually that would be thought of
Have the pleasure to sit down.
Yes, it's not a request.
Please yourself to sit down.
It's an invitation, not a request.
Not quite.
Be pleased to sit down.
Be pleased to sit down.
It's be pleased to be seated.
Yes. Yes. Like in Italian, French, so on. Yes.
Right.
Right.
So within pleasure itself, the word pleasure, there's the intimation of joy, intimation of it that is not strictly reduced to the word.
I would like to question whether pleasure has any relationship with joy.
It would not in itself, I take it you mean.
Or even beyond the word. Is there a line or a continuity of pleasure to joy? Is there a connecting link? Because what is pleasure? I take pleasure in eating. I take pleasure in walking. I take pleasure in accumulating money. I take pleasure in, I don't know, dozen things. Sex, hurting people, sadistic instincts, violent. They're all forms of a pleasure. I enjoy.
intimated here when we talked about the built-in necessity that one observes in a progress that is never consummated. It's just nothing but a termination and then a new start, but no consummation at all. No totality, no fulfillment. Feeling full is what I mean by that.
Yes, I understand, sir. But what is it that's called pleasure? I see something, beautiful, something which I enjoy, and I want it. Pleasure. Pleasure in possession. Take that simple thing.
Yes.
Which the child, the grown-up man, and the priest, and they all have this feeling of pleasure in possession. A toy, or a house, or possessing knowledge, or possessing the idea of God, or the pleasure the dictators have, the totalitarian brutalities, the pleasure. What is that pleasure? To make it very, very simple, what is that pleasure? Look, so what happens. There is a single tree on the hill. Green meadow, deer, and there is this single tree standing on the hill. You see that and you say, how marvelous. You do, not verbally, you say how marvelous to communicate to somebody. But when you are by yourself and see that, it is really astonishingly beautiful. The whole movement of the earth, the flowers, the deer, the meadows, the water, and the single tree with a shadow. You see that. And it's almost breathtaking. And you turn away and go away. Then thought says, how extraordinary that was.
Compared with what now is. Yes.
How extraordinary. I must have it again.
Yes. Yes.
I must get that same feeling which I had there for 2 seconds or 5 minutes. So, thought, see what has taken place. There was immediate response to that beauty. Non-verbal, non-emotional, non-sentimental, non-romantic. Then thought comes around and says, how extraordinary, what a delight that was. And then the memory of it and the repetition, the demand, the desire for the repetition.
When we go to performances, this happens with what we call the encore, doesn't it?
Encore.
And with encores, there's a creeping embarrassment, because with the first reappearance, well, this is a sign of adulation, praise, and everybody is happy. But then, of course, there's the